She stared at me like a ghost. Impossible, you're alive, human. Without short heading 0352. Commander Zurath stood on the bridge, her 4 eyes fixed on the holographic display that floated before her. The distress beacon pulsed with a rhythm that made her skin crawl beneath her scales. Commander, are you certain about this? Her first officer, Krell, shifted his weight nervously. His species, the Vaxiri, were known for their courage in battle, but even he looked uncomfortable. That signature! It's human. Zurath felt the word hang in the air like a curse. Human, the species that had vanished 847 standard cycles ago, leaving behind empty stations and unanswered questions. Every child in the Concordat grew up hearing stories about humans. They were the monsters in cautionary tales, the species that could survive anywhere, that refused to die even when logic demanded it. They had spread across the galaxy like wildfire, adapting to worlds that would kill any other race within hours. And then, one day, they were simply gone. Every human station went dark simultaneously. Every colony fell silent. It was as if the entire species had been erased from existence in a single moment. The Concordat had sent investigation teams at first, but most refused to board the derelict human facilities. Those who did reported finding stations in perfect working order, meals half-eaten, data logs ending mid-sentence. But no bodies, no signs of struggle, just emptiness. The salvage rights alone would set us up for life, Zurath said, though her voice lacked conviction. Human technology is still decades ahead of what we have now. One working fusion core could pay for this entire expedition 10 times over. Krell's throat sac inflated with anxiety. If the technology doesn't kill us first, you've heard the stories, Commander. Human equipment doesn't have safety protocols like ours. They built everything assuming the operator could survive catastrophic failures. Zurath had heard the stories. She'd heard about the human ship found drifting near the Kepler margin, its reactor running at temperatures that would vaporize Concordat engineers. She'd heard about the colony on Gehenna Prime, a world with surface temperatures exceeding 200 degrees standard, where humans had not only survived but thrived. She'd heard about human soldiers who kept fighting with injuries that would send any other species into shock and death. But she'd also heard about the fortunes made by the few brave enough to salvage human sites, and her crew needed this. The Void Whisper was 3 payments behind on docking fees, and creditors were getting aggressive. "We're doing this," Zurath announced. "But we follow protocol. Full environmental suits, weapons charged, and nobody goes anywhere alone. Understood." The bridge crew murmured their acknowledgement, though none of them looked happy about it. Prometheus 7 grew larger in the viewport as they approached. The station was massive, a spinning ring connected to a central hub by 6 spoke corridors. Solar panels extended like wings, many of them damaged by micrometeorite impacts but still functional enough to catch the distant starlight. The whole structure rotated slowly, creating artificial gravity for species that needed it. Life support readings are impossible, their scanner operator announced. "Commander, the biosphere is still running, on emergency power but running. There's oxygen, heat, even water circulation." Zurath felt ice crystallize in her blood. "After 847 cycles. Human engineering, ma'am." "Built to last." The scanner operator's voice wavered. "There's more. I'm detecting thermal signatures in what looks like a hydroponics bay. Could be residual heat from the environmental systems, but it could be something else," Krell finished grimly. They docked at the main airlock, and Zurath led a team of 6 into the station. The airlock cycled with a hiss that sounded like a dying breath. When the inner door opened, they were hit with warm, humid air that smelled of growing things. The station's interior was haunting in its normalcy. Emergency lighting strips glowed a soft blue along the corridors. Signs in human script pointed to various sections: medical, engineering, habitation, research. A coffee mug sat on a desk in an office they passed, a dark ring stained into its bottom. A jacket hung on a hook, waiting for an owner who would never return. "This is wrong," one of the team members whispered. "It feels like they just stepped out for a moment." "Stay focused," Zurath ordered, though she felt the same unease. Her weapon felt too light in her hands, inadequate against the ghosts of this place. They followed the thermal signatures to the hydroponics bay. The doors were sealed, but the control panel still functioned. Zurath pressed her hand to it, and the doors slid open with a whisper of hydraulics. The bay was enormous, easily 300 meters long and 100 wide. Grow lights blazed overhead, their spectrum adjusted for plant growth, and plants there were everywhere. What had once been orderly rows of crops had long since gone wild. Tomato vines climbed support structures and hung from the ceiling. Leafy vegetables had spread across the floor. Fruit trees that should have been small and manageable had grown into twisted giants. The air was thick and green, almost suffocating after the sterile corridors, and standing in the middle of it all, backlit by the grow lights, was a human. Zurath's weapon came up instinctively. Her team fanned out, their own weapons trained on the figure. But the human didn't move aggressively. She just stood there, watching them with eyes that reflected the light like a predator's. She was female, Zurath thought, though human sexual dimorphism was subtle compared to most species. She was short by human standards according to the files, maybe 165 centimeters, but she radiated a dangerous competence that made her seem larger. Her hair was long and matted, pulled back from her face with what looked like wire. Her clothes were a patchwork of different materials, clearly repaired countless times. She held something in her hands, a tool or weapon that Zurath couldn't identify. The human spoke, and Zurath's translator converted the sounds into words. Concordat vessel. I didn't expect visitors. Her voice was rough from disuse but perfectly calm. You should leave, it's not safe here. Zurath stared at the human like she was looking at a ghost, which in a way she was. Impossible, she breathed. You're alive, human. The woman's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. Last time I checked, yes, Dr. Sarah Chen, xenobiology specialist, Prometheus 7 research station. She tilted her head, studying them with unnerving intensity. Your Concordat military based on your ship's configuration. Salvage crew, probably, given the current economic climate, here to strip the station for parts. How are you alive? Krell demanded, his weapon never wavering. Your species has been gone for nearly a millennium. 847 standard cycles, 22 years by Earth reckoning, Sarah corrected. She moved then, just a slight shift of weight, but every weapon tracked her movement. She noticed and went very still. I've been keeping count, and I'm alive because I'm very good at not dying. It's a human talent, Zurath's mind raced. A living human. The xenobiologists would pay fortunes just for a medical scan. The military would want to debrief her. The historical societies would fight wars over the chance to interview her. But looking at the woman standing before her, covered in dirt and scars, eyes too calm for someone who had been alone for 2 decades, Zurath felt that old childhood fear creeping back. You speak Concordat standard, Zurath said, trying to regain her composure. That shouldn't be possible. The translator databases were lost with your people. I had a lot of time to study, Sarah replied. 22 years is a long time to be alone. You learn languages, you maintain systems, you keep the plants growing. You stay busy or you go insane, she paused. Well, sane is relative at this point. What happened? Zurath asked. Where did your people go? Sarah's expression darkened. That's complicated. And we don't have time for the full story. She looked past them, toward the corridor they'd entered from. Tell me, Commander, did you notice any unusual sensor readings on your approach? Geometric patterns in space that your navigation systems couldn't properly render. Zurath exchanged glances with Krell. There were some anomalies in the nebula. Our science officer attributed them to sensor interference. They weren't interference. Sarah's voice took on an edge of urgency. They were scouts. And you led them right here. She started moving toward them, and Zurath's team tensed. We need to get to the command center now. Stay where you are, Zurath ordered. You're not in command here. Sarah stopped, and for a moment something dangerous flickered across her face. Then it was gone, replaced by patient exhaustion. Commander Zurath, is it? I've been monitoring your communications. You seem like an intelligent person, so I'm going to explain this once. This station isn't abandoned. It's a watch post. I'm not a survivor. I'm a volunteer. And you just rang the dinner bell for something that makes your worst nightmares look like pleasant dreams. What are you talking about? Krell demanded. Sarah looked at him, and Zurath saw something in those human eyes that made her blood run cold. It was the look of someone who had seen horrors and survived them through sheer stubborn will. I'm talking about the reason humanity disappeared, Officer Krell. I'm talking about the architects, and I'm talking about the fact that one of their harvest ships just detected your energy signature and is currently adjusting course to intercept. Alarms began blaring throughout the station, as if summoned by Sarah's words. The human didn't even flinch at the sound. She just stood there waiting while Zurath's carefully planned salvage operation began to crumble around her like sand. "You need to leave," Sarah repeated. "Now, before they arrive. Get your crew off this station and jump to hyperspace immediately." "And what about you?" Zurath found herself asking. Sarah's smile was bitter and tired. "Me, I'm staying. I've been waiting here for 847 cycles for them to come back. This station has a purpose, Commander." "And so do I," she paused, her expression softening slightly. "But you don't have to die here with me. Take your people and run. Forget you ever found this place." Zurath stared at the human woman, this ghost from a vanished species, standing alone in her garden fortress. Every instinct screamed at her to do exactly what Sarah suggested. Run, escape, survive. But she'd spent her whole life hearing stories about humans, about their impossible endurance and their refusal to quit. And now, faced with the reality, she found herself asking the question that would change everything. "What if we stayed? What if we helped?" Sarah Chen stared at her for a long moment. Then she laughed, a sound rusty and genuine. "Then, Commander, I'd say you're crazier than I am. But if you're serious, we have work to do. Because they'll be here in less than 6 hours, and we have a lot of preparing to do before this station earns its name." She extended her hand in the human gesture of greeting. "Welcome to Prometheus 7. Try not to die." The command center of Prometheus 7 hummed with power as Sarah's fingers danced across control panels that hadn't been fully active in decades. Zurath watched in fascination as display after display flickered to life, showing station schematics, sensor readings, and data streams in human script that scrolled too fast to read even with her translator working overtime. "Your crew needs to get your ship to a safe distance," Sarah said without looking up from her work. "At least 10,000 kilometers. Once the architects arrive, anything closer than that becomes part of the target zone." Commander's orders. They see all current biological life as failed experiments that need to be corrected. If we're going to help, we need to know what we're facing. Originally, it was supposed to be a terraforming waypoint, but 3 years before the Great Silence, our deep space probes started finding things. Structures, machines, all of them billions of years old, all of them still functional. It showed a geometric construct that hurt to look at, angles that seemed to exist in more dimensions than 3, surfaces that reflected light in impossible ways. Just seeing it made Zurath's head ache. We called them the architects because they built the infrastructure of life itself. Every habitable world in the galaxy, every planet that evolved sentient species, was seeded by them. They created the basic genetic templates, set the conditions, and then went to sleep while their experiments matured. Why would they do that? And then they would harvest. Everything else gets sterilized. The worlds are reset to baseline conditions, reseeded with new templates, and the cycle begins again. They've done it at least twice before across this galaxy. We found evidence of previous civilizations, species that reached the stars just like we did, all of them wiped away without a trace except for the data the architects stored. Ancient ruins that predated any known civilization, genetic sequences that matched no living species, mathematical proofs written in languages that had been dead for millions of years. Humanity found all this about 28 years ago, Earth time. Our scientists went into overdrive studying it, and that's when we made the discovery that changed everything. We found out that the architects were waking up. Our expansion, our broadcasts, our presence across so many worlds, it triggered their collection protocols early. They were coming back to harvest the current cycle, and we had maybe a decade to prepare. But humans are good at doing impossible things when the alternative is extinction. We formed a plan, a desperate, insane plan that required sacrifices most people couldn't imagine. She turned to face them fully now, and her eyes held a pain that was almost physical. "Humanity didn't vanish, Commander. We evacuated. Every human in known space, civilians, military, everyone. We packed onto colony ships and jumped into uncharted space, regions so far out that the architect's sensors wouldn't detect us. Why were there no reports of massive human fleet movements? We left food on tables, lights on, everything in perfect order. We wanted the architects to think they'd successfully collected humanity, that we were already processed and cataloged. and we wanted the rest of the galaxy to think we just mysteriously vanished. To make the architects think their harvest was complete, so they'd ignore the hidden human population. Some tested defensive measures. She gestured around the command center. Prometheus 7 had a special role. We were the survival test. If I could last here alone until the real harvest began, it proved that humans could outlast the architect's collection cycle. That we could hide in plain sight while they thought they'd already cleaned up. Emily was 6 years old. My wife and we talked about it. We knew that if I stayed, Emily would grow up without me, might never see me again. But if I didn't stay, if the test failed, Emily wouldn't grow up at all. None of the human children would. Her voice cracked slightly. So yes, I've been alone. I've grown vegetables and maintained systems and fought off architect probes and counted the days and wondered if anyone was even still alive out there to receive my data. And I'd do it all again if it meant my daughter had a chance to live. The stories made them sound like monsters, fearless and inhuman in their resilience. But looking at Sarah Chen, she saw something else entirely. Not a monster, but a mother who had given up everything for a future she would never see. Alarms suddenly blared across the station. Sarah spun back to her controls, her moment of vulnerability vanishing behind professional focus. They're here, early, must have been closer than I thought. Something was emerging from subspace near the station, and looking at it made Zureth's eyes water. It was vast, easily 10 times the size of the largest Concordat battleship. Its surface seemed to flow like liquid metal, geometric patterns shifting and reorganizing constantly. Just the sensor feed was enough to make her feel dizzy and nauseous. That's an architect harvester, Sarah said, her voice tight. Smaller than the ones that took the main human worlds, but still more than enough to sterilize this entire sector. It's scanning the station now. In about 3 minutes, it's going to realize there's still biological activity here, and then it's going to correct that oversight. Get to the ship and jump to hyperspace before it's too late. What is it? Big enough to crack a moon if detonated properly, and if I can get the harvester close enough, I can take it with me. The only question was whether I'd die alone after decades of waiting, or if I'd die taking one of these things with me. Today, I finally get my answer. What if we don't have to sacrifice this station? You said you've been sending data to the hidden human fleet. Have they responded? The deep space transmitter has been damaged for 8 years. I've been broadcasting on a loop, but I have no way of knowing if anyone received it. For all I know, the human fleet was found and harvested, and I'm the last human alive in the galaxy. If we can get a message out, if your people are still alive, they deserve to know you kept the light on. Most species in the Concordat were probably relieved when we disappeared. Someone who's been fighting alone for 2 decades, who gave up everything including her family, just to buy other species time they don't even know they need. If that's what it means to be human, then I think the galaxy made a mistake being relieved when you left. You'll need to bypass the radiation shielding. The whole section is hot from reactor leakage. I can't go. Someone needs to manage the harvester approach from here. Keep it interested but not alarmed. I'm going to give it what it's looking for: biological activity, life signs. Make it think it needs to do a careful extraction rather than just vaporizing the station from a distance. She started pulling on pieces of what looked like an old combat exosuit, the armor plating scarred and patched. I've done this 46 times before with the smaller probes. Fought them in vacuum, in radiation zones, in places where your people would die in seconds. This is just a bigger dance partner. Probably, Sarah agreed cheerfully, sealing her helmet. But I've had 22 years to perfect being crazy. Now go fix that transmitter. And Zureth, if this works, if my people answer, tell them Sarah Chen kept her post. Tell them I didn't quit. The stubborn, impossible refusal to give up even when logic demanded surrender. She just hoped they could all survive long enough to see if that stubbornness could actually save everyone. Zureth ran through the corridors of Prometheus 7 with her team close behind, their boots clanging against metal floors that had known only silence for decades. The station groaned around them as the architect harvester's scanning beams swept across its hull. Through the windows that lined the spoke corridor, she could see the geometric nightmare hanging in space, its surface rippling with patterns that made her stomach turn. Section 7 is just ahead, Krell panted, checking his handheld scanner. Radiation levels are spiking. Commander, are you sure about this? We could still make it back to the ship. The least we can do is give her a few hours of help. She activated her communicator. Chen, we're approaching Section 7. What's your status? I'm outside the station, heading toward the Harvester's forward scanning array. It's detected me and is trying to figure out what I am. The confusion is buying us time. How long do you need? Either way, it'll stop being patient. There was a pause, then her voice came back with something that might have been amusement. You know, it's actually nice having someone to talk to during this. Usually, I just narrate to myself. Vess pulled out the access codes Sarah had provided and began working on the panel. These human systems are so aggressive, he muttered. Every safety protocol assumes the user can survive catastrophic failure. Or we're too stubborn to die properly, one of the two. The levels weren't immediately lethal, but prolonged exposure would be dangerous even through their protective gear. Sarah, these radiation levels are extreme, Zurath reported. How did you survive working in here? And with a lot of anti-radiation medication that probably took years off my life. But when you're already committed to dying on a space station, you stop worrying about long-term health effects. Sarah's breathing was becoming heavier. I'm engaging the Harvester now. It's launching collection drones, small ones about the size of your head. They're trying to capture me for analysis. The human moved with a grace that seemed impossible in the bulky combat suit, dodging between pieces of station debris and using a weapon that fired superheated plasma. One of the architect drones exploded in a shower of geometric fragments that defied physics as they scattered. The transmitter room was a disaster. The main array had been partially crushed by what looked like an impact from an architect probe. Wiring hung loose like mechanical intestines. The primary power coupling was cracked, leaking coolant that had long since frozen into blue-white crystals on the floor. Krell's engineer, a Thovian named Emrix with 6 delicate manipulator arms, immediately began assessing the damage. This is bad. The core components are intact, but the wave guide is shattered. We'll need to fabricate a replacement. But it won't be elegant, more like a patch made of hope and improvisation. It's deploying a capture field. The human was moving faster now, almost desperately, firing her weapon at the nodes where the energy streams intersected. When her shots connected, the web flickered and weakened, but it kept reforming. It's learning my tactics, Sarah reported, her voice strained. Every time I destroy a node, the next one it generates is in a harder position to hit. The damn thing is adapting in real time. Right now I'm keeping it focused on me. There was a grunt of effort. Besides, I've been fighting these things alone for years. I'm not going to start needing help now just because there are witnesses. The capture field was tightening, and there were too many drones now coming from multiple angles. Sarah destroyed 3 in quick succession, but 5 more replaced them. Her movements were slowing, whether from fatigue or damage to her suit. Zurath couldn't tell. How long, Emrix? Zurath demanded. 20 minutes minimum. The fabrication process can't be rushed without compromising the structural integrity. Krell, you're in charge here. Make sure Emrix gets that transmitter working. Sarah shouldn't have to fight alone anymore. Besides, she's been out there for 22 years. I can manage 20 minutes. She'd done basic EVA training, but nothing had prepared her for combat in zero gravity against an enemy that didn't follow normal physics. The architect drones moved in ways that shouldn't be possible, changing direction without thrust, accelerating without visible propulsion. Sarah's voice came through immediately. Zurath, what are you doing out here? The recoil sent her spinning, and she had to use her maneuvering jets to stabilize. Also, I'm terrible at this. Second rule, the enemy doesn't care about rules. She fired a burst that destroyed 2 drones. Stay close to the station hull. Use the structure for cover and leverage. A drone came at her from above, and this time she braced against the hull before firing. Her shot connected, and the drone shattered into those impossible fragments. I hit one. Only about 100 more to go. Sarah was moving toward her now, still fighting but repositioning. We need to create a crossfire pattern. If we can funnel them into a kill zone between us, we might survive this. Everything Sarah did seemed improvised, reactive, built on instinct rather than training. But it worked. The drones, programmed for efficiency, struggled against tactics that made no logical sense. The harvester's changing strategy, Sarah warned. It's pulling back the drones. That's not good. Once we're frozen, it'll just scoop us up like specimens. Zurath's movements became sluggish, as if she were moving through syrup. Fight it, Sarah commanded. Keep moving. The field works by slowing molecular motion. As long as you're generating kinetic energy, you can resist it. Zurath felt her limbs growing heavier with each passing second. Through her fading vision, she saw Sarah still fighting, still moving with desperate determination even as the stasis field pulled at her. The human reached into a pouch on her suit and pulled out what looked like a grenade. Sarah, what are you doing? Designed to disrupt architect technology. Problem is, it also disrupts our equipment. But the stasis field collapsed, and suddenly she could move again. The harvester recoiled, its surface patterns flickering and reorganizing in what might have been confusion or pain. That bought us maybe 5 minutes, Sarah said, her suit sparking with electrical damage. Tell me Emrix is almost done. Commander, we're ready when you are. They tumbled into the airlock together, and Zurath hit the cycle button with numb fingers. As the door sealed and air flooded the chamber, both of them collapsed against the walls, gasping. That was insane, Zurath managed. Welcome to Fighting Architects, Sarah replied. She pulled off her helmet, and Zurath was shocked to see the human was grinning despite a cut on her forehead that was bleeding freely. Come on. Let's see if anyone's still listening after all these years. Sarah sat down at the console, her hands shaking slightly. For the first time since Zurath had met her, the human looked uncertain. 22 years, she whispered. What if nobody's there? What if it was all for nothing? There's only one way to find out. Prometheus 7 to Fleet Command. Contact Protocol Sierra Victor 9. The harvest has begun. The sleepers are awake. Sarah's voice was steady now, professional. Then she added softer, Chen to anyone listening. I kept the light on. Come home. Could be hours, could be never. Sarah stood, moving to check the weapons locker. But we gave it our best shot. Now we prepare for the possibility that we're going to have to detonate this station after all. A voice came through, old and tired but unmistakably human. Prometheus 7, this is Fleet Command. Message received. Authentication confirmed. There was a pause, heavy with emotion. Hello, Mom, we're coming home. Tears began streaming down her face. Emily. Not the sickly geometry of architect technology, but clean, powerful human jump signatures. Ship after ship emerged from hyperspace, filling the void with their presence. They were scarred and battle-worn, designed for war in ways that made Concordat vessels look fragile. And they were all heading straight for the harvester. Sarah Chen stood at the window, watching her daughter's fleet arrive, and for the first time in 22 years, she wasn't alone. The space around Prometheus 7 transformed from empty void into a battlefield in seconds. Human warships materialized with mathematical precision, their formation creating a sphere around the station with the architect harvester caught inside. Each vessel bore scars from centuries of hidden warfare, their hulls marked with tallies and symbols in languages that had evolved in isolation from the rest of the galaxy. Zurath watched through the command center windows as the human fleet moved with synchronized purpose. These weren't the exploratory vessels humanity had used during their expansion. These were weapons, purpose-built over 847 cycles of desperate preparation. Their design was aggressive and efficient, with none of the aesthetic considerations that Concordat shipwrights preferred. Every surface, every angle served a function. All ships, this is Admiral Chen. The voice from the comm was calm and professional now, the emotion locked away behind military discipline. Target the harvester's primary collection arrays, pattern Delta 7. Fire on my mark. Now she's commanding a fleet. They were hybrid systems that mixed conventional explosives with exotic matter, creating detonations that seemed to tear at reality itself. The architect harvester's shields flared and buckled under the assault, but the harvester was far from helpless. Its surface rippled and reconfigured, launching swarms of drones that moved with terrifying intelligence. They didn't just attack randomly, but coordinated their strikes, targeting the human ship's weak points with surgical precision. They're adapting to our tactics already, Admiral Chen's voice reported. All ships switch to randomized firing patterns. Don't give it time to predict our movements. Several ships took damage, their hulls breached by weapons that didn't just destroy matter but seemed to unravel it at the molecular level. But the human vessels didn't retreat. Instead, the damaged ships positioned themselves to shield their intact companions, their crews continuing to fight even as their life support failed. "They're sacrificing themselves," Krell said, horror in his voice. "Those ships are doomed, but they're still fighting." "Emily, this is Prometheus 7. I can help. The station's reactor can be overloaded to create an EMP burst. It won't destroy the harvester, but it'll disrupt its coordination for about 90 seconds. If you overload that reactor, the station will be destroyed. There's no time to evacuate you. Besides, 90 seconds is all you'll need if you hit it with everything you've got while it's vulnerable. You can't throw that away now. If we don't stop it here, more will come, hundreds more. And then nothing my daughter built, nothing humanity sacrificed will matter. We'll all die anyway." "Understood, Prometheus 7. Fleet will be in position in 4 minutes. Make it count, Mom." "You've got about 5 minutes before this station becomes a very large bomb. Someone needs to stay and help Sarah manage the overload. The timing has to be perfect or the EMP won't be strong enough." Zurath moved to the secondary control station. "I'm staying." Fast, Zurath met the human's gaze. "You said humans don't leave people behind. Well, neither do I, not anymore. Commander Zurath and I have work to do." Sarah pulled up the reactor schematics on the main display. "The overload is already building. What we need to do is shape it, focus the electromagnetic pulse in a directional burst rather than a sphere. That requires manually adjusting the magnetic containment fields in sequence." She highlighted a series of controls. "I'll handle the primary systems. You need to watch these secondary monitors. When I call out a command, you execute it immediately. No hesitation. Even a second's delay could cause the whole thing to explode prematurely." Around them, the human fleet was repositioning, forming a spearhead formation aimed directly at the harvester. 3 minutes to optimal detonation," Sarah announced. The station was beginning to shake now, the reactor's power building beyond safe limits. Warning klaxons blared in human and concordat languages simultaneously. "Emily, we're on track. How's your positioning?" "Called you the lighthouse keeper, because you kept a light burning in the dark so we could find our way home. There are children, thousands of them, who grew up hearing stories about you, about your courage." "I was just doing my job, baby." It intensified its assault on the human fleet, launching everything it had. 3 more human ships were destroyed, their crews' final transmissions defiant to the end. But the formation held, every ship trusting their admiral, trusting the plan. 2 minutes, Sarah called out. "Zurath, start the sequence. Command Alpha 7. Through the hull, she could feel the reactor's power growing, a barely contained sun trying to break free. 1 minute. Command Beta 3. Hull breaches in 17 sections. Life support failing, structural integrity at 40% and dropping. 30 seconds, Command Gamma 9. The energy was focused now, a directional weapon aimed at the harvester. She looked at Sarah and saw the human woman was smiling despite everything. "Not bad for your first reactor overload," Sarah said. "Ready for the finale." "Emily, you're up." But it wasn't a chaotic detonation. It was controlled, focused, a spear of electromagnetic fury that lanced across space and struck the architect harvester at the same instant as the fleet's weapons. The combined assault was too much even for technology billions of years old. The harvester's shields collapsed. Its hull, previously impervious to damage, cracked and splintered. Zurath found herself thrown against the wall as the station tore itself apart. Emergency force fields sprang up, creating small pockets of survivable atmosphere within the expanding debris cloud. She could see Sarah across the command center, trapped behind a wall of wreckage but still alive, still watching through a cracked window as the harvester died. The architect's ship was breaking apart now, its impossible geometry fragmenting into pieces that hurt to look at. The human fleet pressed their advantage, pouring fire into the wounds until the harvester finally detonated in a pulse of light that washed over everything. When Zurath's vision cleared, the harvester was gone. Only debris remained, scattered across space like the bones of a dead god. "Prometheus 7, this is Fleet Command. Do you read?" Admiral Chen's voice was urgent, desperate. "Mom, respond, please. Transport ships are moving to your position now. We're pulling you both out. The Concordat makes them tough too. The interior was cramped and utilitarian, designed for function over comfort. But it was warm and pressurized and safe. The transport docked with the fleet's flagship, a massive vessel called the Long Watch. Sarah was barely through the airlock before she was swept into a fierce embrace by a woman whose hair was gray and whose face was lined with age and command, but whose eyes were the same as the 6-year-old girl in Sarah's faded photograph. "You kept your promise," Admiral Chen whispered, holding her mother like she might disappear again. "You came back." "Relativity is cruel that way," Emily gestured around at the ship. "Mom, there's so much to show you, so many people who want to meet you. The whole fleet, they all know your name." "Admiral Chen, this is Commander Zurath of the Concordat salvage vessel Void Whisper. She found me, helped me, fought beside me. She's the reason I'm alive to have this conversation." "Commander, humanity owes you a debt we can never fully repay. You gave me my mother back. No one should have to fight alone. There's a Concordat Emergency Council meeting happening in about 6 hours. They detected the battle and they're panicking. I think it's time we introduced ourselves properly and explained what's been happening while they thought we were gone." The council meeting was held via quantum communication, with representatives from every major Concordat species appearing as holograms around a massive conference table. Admiral Chen stood at the head, with Sarah and Zurath flanking her. The expressions on the counselors' faces ranged from shock to fear to barely concealed hostility. "This council recognizes Admiral Emily Chen of the human fleet," the Concordat Chancellor announced, his voice stiff with protocol. "Though we must note that humanity has no official standing in this body, having abandoned their territories and responsibilities 847 cycles ago. And in the process, we've been fighting a war to save all of you, whether you knew it or not. The architects have been probing Concordat space for the last 800 cycles. They've destroyed 47 colony worlds on the frontier, events you attributed to natural disasters or anomalous phenomena. Everyone was an architect test run, preparing for a full harvest. And everyone was eventually stopped by human forces operating in secret. I saw the architect harvester. I fought alongside Sarah Chen against technology that makes our most advanced weapons look primitive, and I watched the human fleet risk everything to destroy it." She looked around at the council members. "Humanity didn't disappear because they were weak or afraid. They disappeared because they were the only ones strong enough to fight what was coming, and they've been protecting us ever since." "My daughter is right about one thing. The architects are waking up. More harvesters are coming, probably already on their way. Humanity alone can't stop them all. We need the Concordat's help. We need every species, every ship, every resource we can pool together. Because this isn't humanity's fight anymore, it's everyone's. We've spent 847 cycles learning how to fight the architects. Now we need to teach you. Because when they come in force, we either stand together or we all fall alone." Around her, her crew worked in harmony, humans and Concordat species learning from each other, sharing tactics and technology. In the distance, a combined fleet was assembling, the largest military force the galaxy had ever seen. Sarah Chen served as an advisor, teaching new recruits what it meant to fight impossible odds. Her daughter commanded the fleet's vanguard. And Zurath, promoted to captain for her actions at Prometheus 7, served as the bridge between two galaxies that were learning to trust each other. The architects were coming, but this time, they wouldn't face a divided galaxy of separate species. They would face something they'd never encountered before. A unified front of humans and aliens fighting side by side, refusing to quit, refusing to surrender. As Zurath watched the fleet prepare, she thought back to that moment in the hydroponics bay when she'd first seen Sarah Chen. She'd stared at the human like a ghost, impossible and terrifying. Now she knew the truth. Humans weren't ghosts, they were survivors. And they'd taught the rest of the galaxy how to survive too. The war was just beginning. But for the first time they had hope, and sometimes hope was the most powerful weapon of all.